Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is, pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Welcome, one and all, to the 30-minute Midas touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And with me, as always, is my co-host, the model, Mark Tipton.
Well, I don't think I quite live up to that billing. I do appreciate the intent and the compliment, but I don't think I qualify for that. I think I have a face for radio or podcast, as the case may be. First, I'd like to really move into a subject, if we could. I'd really like to get right into it here on the 30-minute Midas Touch. What I want to talk about is a subject that I think is foremost in the minds of many wrestling fans right now. And this is a subject we've brought up or mentioned before. But this is the idea of wrestling promoters working together. What we see is the AEW and Impact, the AEW World Champion appearing on Impact Wrestling, and so forth, and working with each other. And I want to see your opinions on this kind of idea.
Yeah, it's not, I'm of the belief that promoters cannot work together. And I think that's, from experience, from just the history of professional wrestling in general. This is not, anytime you say something like this, you're labeled as bitter or cynical. And it really is not about that at all. It doesn't come from a place of ego, as people like to make it out to be. Maybe it's a little bit of ego, but it's healthy ego, in my opinion. When promoters are working together, you understand if you own a promotion or you're booking a promotion or whatever it is, your job and your loyalty is to that promotion, to make that one promotion as successful as possible. So when you start infiltrating other promotions or you start integrating other companies into what you're doing, then ultimately what you're doing is you're devaluing your own product, or you're devaluing your own talent, or you're taking things away and opportunities away from them. So, and that's kind of what I'm thinking with the AEW and Impact doing business together. Of course, they like to think that this is like the Monday Night Wars, and this is, what if WCW and WWE actually worked together during that time period and created this big boom? And that's not exactly what's going on. These AEW and NXT, for instance, are fighting over 700,000 people. It's ridiculous, right? Today's wrestling, we've talked about it before, is on a downward spiral like never before. Like the last Nitro, I think they did, or Nitro in 2001 did a rating of 2.6, and here we have Raw doing 1.5s. You understand? We're in a completely different place when it comes to professional wrestling. I had a fan stop me this week and actually, isn't this great that Kenny Omega and AEW and Impact are working together? I really think it's going to be better for everyone. And I said, well, no, not really. And he kind of looked puzzled, and he said, well, why not? And I said, well, if Kenny Omega appears on Impact, Kenny Omega is a all-elite wrestler. You understand? He's under contract to them. So if he appears on Impact Wrestling, then that means he's taking airtime away from an Impact wrestler. It could be 2 guys, it could be 4 guys. He's taking some kind of sustainable television time away from them and their product for himself. So to me, it's not that someone else is getting more opportunities. It's you're actually shrinking the talent pool down to where if there's 20 guys getting to be featured on Impact and there's 20 guys featured on AEW, then you're more looking at 15 and 15. You understand? If they start crossing over like that, you're actually dwindling the talent down. So for me, it's always been about self-preservation. Like if your job is to make Impact Wrestling the number one wrestling promotion in the world, or your job is to make All Elite, then that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be worried about building other brands.
Well, as you mentioned about the idea of it, not necessarily about ego and the criticism of promotions working together, one of the things I think of is just from a historical perspective, there have been instances in the past where this has been tried, and there have been instances where it has not been as successful as you would like it to be. I want to say, and this is kind of out of left field here, but I'd say I remember World Class and AEWA trying to work together once upon a time, among other things. And it's been tried in other instances. And it's always been an issue. Is that where you're coming from on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has to be a clear, like I work with other promoters in the sense of we're not competing with each other in any way, shape, or form. You understand? I have promoters that I'm friends with, but they're not in my area. They're not in my immediate area, and we pose absolutely no threat to each other. Now, if it came a point to where they're trying to steal talent away from me on a regular basis, if I build up a heel that I feel is my top heel in my company, then all of a sudden he's working for them 90% of the time instead of taking my bookings, then that becomes an issue. Same thing with what happened with Vince McMahon and some of the other promoters. Like they all banded together trying to work against Vince McMahon, and his quote was probably the most famous quote of it all. You guys will have more trouble ordering lunch than you would running a wrestling company, because it's a shot at promoters can't agree on anything. And they really can. I mean, it's not, I have my own thought process. This guy has his own thought process. It's not a conducive relationship to build a company with someone else. Like I said before, you have to have one guy that goes yes, no, maybe, whatever. But it's that one guy that finally makes a decision. And if you got 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 chiefs all trying to make the same decisions, it always ends up in a big cluster fuck, for lack of a better term.
Well, I do understand. There was one other point you made in the opening portion that caught my attention. It was about taking time away from the performers, is what I'll say, or wrestlers, however you prefer to say it. Even if you want to take it away from promotions working together, I thought in the instance of the WWE, they have gone back and forth between the brand split. They have had separate rosters on SmackDown and Raw from time to time. And then they've also had periods of time where they do the Super Show concept. And one of the arguments is, during the Super Show concept, you have a handful of people who are taking up a great deal of the airtime on both programs, and then you don't build depth within the roster of your company. Is that the kind of idea you're going toward, about having 20 guys going down to 15? Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm okay with the brand split and things like that. It's just, to me, it needs to be more distinct. You understand? Like, I watch Raw and I watch SmackDown, and they're really not that much different of a show. You understand? They're shot the same. They're presented the same. The booking is generally the same. There's no concernable difference between the two. You understand? So my idea was always like, hey, put Paul Heyman on SmackDown, put Jim Cornette on Raw, and really let them go at it. You know, as diverse as those two gentlemen are at their respective products, imagine what kind of competition they would create between themselves. It would just be fun as a wrestling fan just to see what they would come up with. And like I said, and when we get to the Super Show aspect of it, yeah, it's really hard to win. Maybe you're a guy on SmackDown and you're a featured guy on the program, and you're featured every week. But then when it comes time for the WrestleManias or the SummerSlams and things like that, you don't have a feature on those shows because you're not the number 1 program on SmackDown. You're the 3rd or 4th program on SmackDown. So you get dwindled down the car, especially when you put in consideration with Raw and everything else too, and now NXT and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's one of those things where television time is just so valuable. You want to use every bit of it to help everybody, including your company. So,
well, I do appreciate that. I did think, as you were speaking about that, we mentioned the word ego, and when you bring up the notion of Paul Heyman running Raw and Cornette, or someone else running SmackDown, and allowing a competition to brew between the two, the first thing I thought was, would Vince McMahon's ego allow such a thing to happen without him getting involved? And he has been the one head, undeniably, of that company, and it's his company, rightfully so, I understand that. But that is why you would see a very similar product in both shows, and it would And so the idea of him stepping back and allowing someone else to run with it seems to be an issue to demonstrate why, if you can't do it within a promotion, why separate promotions could not do that, cooperatively.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is in a perfect world we're talking about. If Vince McMahon was allowed to let those two guys rule the roost, as they say, and have very minimal input, not input that wouldn't sway either one. You understand? Like input that would allow them to have their creativity, but still within the confines of the WWE product, if that makes any sense. I think Vince, as successful as he's been, he's also been a very big detriment to himself and his company. You understand? And allowing people not to have, a little bit of freedom every now and again. Like trust me, I'm a control guy too. I want to make sure that everything on my show is the way I want it to be and things like that too. I also try to allow guys to have a little bit of breathing room as to what they do and how they do it, so we can get that creative spunk to it. You know what I mean? Like some things will not feel real. Some things will not feel as authentic as they can if I'm overproducing the product. Same thing with Vince. I think he overproduces too much of it. Giving a guy a mic and saying, "Hey, go talk 3 minutes about this," would do wonders for the WWE product. You know what I mean? Because everything now is scripted and written down, and pause here and say this and use this inflection and not that inflection and things like that. It takes away all creativity and all performance aspects of what we do. I'm not an actor. I'm a professional wrestler. And there's certain things, like we said before, there's certain things in wrestling that you can do that you can't do anywhere else. Same thing with this. There's ways and speech patterns and the way you talk in promos and things like that that are 100% authentic to professional wrestling and not so much authentic to the world of acting and film and television, things like that. So I think giving, teach a man a fish. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, feed him for a lifetime. That's one of my favorite sayings, and I truly believe that. If you teach someone how to talk, you teach someone how to cut a promo, you teach someone how to work, you teach someone match structure, you teach someone these things, and then they can take them and mold them into their own creativity. It makes a huge difference into what's going on.
All right. This conversation has spawned another question in my mind. I want to go to one of the criticisms I've heard of NXT. Now we're staying within WWE, but NXT was a promotion that reportedly and allegedly Vince McMahon had very little involvement with for a long time. It was Triple H who was of the guiding force of NXT for the most part. And it gained a very significant, not nearly as large as WWE itself, but a passionate fan base. And I have heard criticisms leveled at it, I should say, since they've gone to the USA Network to where they've become more like Raw Junior. Would that be something where you would see the idea of a change in direction and the, homogenized idea?
Yeah, I mean, I was, as great of an opportunity as it was for them to be on USA every week and things like that, it's a tough spot to be in because really, NXT is supposed to be a developmental territory. It's supposed to be where guys go to kind of, smooth themselves out, get polished, hone things, and then eventually, make their way to the main rosters. What do you do when your developmental territory is now in millions and millions of homes and on national television on a weekly basis? It's no longer developmental. You understand? It's a brand to itself. So it's almost like they need a developmental territory for their once developmental territory, because their whole concept is we're teaching guys who've not done our television, but not done hardly any television, how to do television, right? And how to do matches like that and do that storytelling in this specific setting. So now we're in a situation where, where do they go to learn? They're just learning within the Performance Center, and then they're thrust on national television. And to me, that's a lose situation, because, one of the most famous Twitter accounts is that Steve McMichael Twitter account, where they show all the flubs that Mongo McMichael had in WCW, and everyone loves to laugh at that and how great it is, right? Well, you got to think, Mongo McMichael was in his late 30s when he started wrestling. He was a Super Bowl champion, and he probably had his first 50 or 60 matches on live television. You understand? Now, how would it have benefited if Mongo could have actually went to developmental and actually had matches in front of people? 50, 60 matches, that's all really he needed. 50, 60 matches where he could hone and learn before he actually made a debut. I think a lot of that would have been cut down, and we wouldn't have that kind of Twitter site if something like that took place. So now we're essentially going through the same thing with a lot of people. They're making, they make mistakes on national television that we can't come back from because, well, once it's on national television, it's out there.
As you were mentioning that, this may take us a little bit off the subject, but something did come to mind. We were talking about their first appearances being on television and being thrust out there. And we have individuals, and WWE has done this historically. They will incorporate talent who do not necessarily have an extensive background in professional wrestling. They will bring in former professional football players, for example. Baron Corbin comes to mind. He had experience in the NFL, and then he came straight to the WWE. One of the things I thought is we are in an era now where they're not allowed to have live events to any great extent. And those would be one place where you could have those people gain that type of experience. And so do you think the COVID situation that we're all dealing with has adversely affected the development of professional wrestlers?
I mean, obviously it has. We're going to see, just how much it's affected pretty soon. But I think that we were heading down that road regardless. You understand? We were already working towards that, like you said before, that sports entertainment kind of thing. Like, okay, don't grab a hold, or don't do this. Don't acknowledge the crowd. Don't do, understand, like that very tight, that very restricted kind of wrestling, as to where we know that professional wrestling is the ultimate fan driven experience, where you can dictate, the fans can dictate a lot of what's going on, just by their reactions. As a promoter and as a booker, you try to listen to your audience to see what they want, or maybe where they want you to go. It doesn't mean that they necessarily plan out your whole thing for you. But you know what? You use them as a guide. Like, oh, I didn't realize that guy was that over. I didn't realize he was getting that reaction. Maybe they don't want to boo him anymore. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to give him the switch. Things like that. And I'm one of those promoters that actually listens. I don't just make decisions randomly. I listen to my people and try to figure out, where we need to go. And that's kind of been my thing. In West Tennessee, you can't throw a rock 20 feet without hitting another weekly wrestling promotion. It's the way it's been for decades. There's nothing we can do to really change that. And I seem to be one of the only guys that have said, hey, it's not okay to jump from promotion to promotion and still be okay with that. That went around for a long time before we started our promotion. And I kind of put my foot down and a line in the sand saying, okay, you guys have your guys, we have our guys. Let's see who's better, that kind of thing. And, you can't tell these guys. I'm not telling anyone where they can't work. I'm saying if you want to work for me, you're going to work for me. My analogy for it is, Mark Tipton, let me ask you a question. If you want a Big Mac, where do you have to go?
Well, you have to go to McDonald's.
Exactly. You can't get a Big Mac at Taco Bell. You can't get it at Wendy's. You can't get it at Long John Silver's. You have to go to McDonald's to get a Big Mac. So if you're a professional wrestler and I book you, you're my Big Mac. I want you on my show. If people are going to come watch you wrestle, then I want them to come see you wrestle at my promotion. That's your value to me. Now, if they can wait and see you down the road next week, or 20 miles this way, or whatever it is, then your value to me it's useless. You understand? We're going to put effort into you. We're going to put effort into making sure that your value is optimized within our company. So that's what we want to see. So And that's that concept. I don't know why that concept has been so foreign to so many guys around here, but to them it's like, oh, they spent so many years jumping from promotion. They didn't like what was going on with this one, they jumped to the next one. They didn't like what was going on, they go back to the other one, and they just jump back and forth. And it was the same. It was so blurred that no one knew who was where or what company was what. They would all get mixed together. But now I think a lot of people understand Pro Wrestling Mid-South. They understand who our guys are and where they come from, things like that. And I usually, there's some guys we've had jumping back and forth, but it's been like okay, you get an opportunity. If you squander that opportunity, don't fool me twice. That kind of thing. So.
Well, really, I hear you speaking as a promoter in this instance more so than a professional wrestler in this critique. And the way I interpret that, and I do see the logic behind this, is why do you want to spend time developing and or showcasing a talent for someone else's show 25, 30 miles down the road the next weekend? And that's really where I think you're going. And so this kind of idea, is that the kind of idea that creates issues? And we could take this to a more local level. You may have some examples of local professional wrestling as the idea of promotions working together. And is this an example of that kind of problem?
Yeah, I mean, everyone. Listen, when you first get into wrestling, everyone's very optimistic and pie in the sky. Oh, we could all work together. We could all put our egos aside and we could work together. I once said that once upon a time too, but it doesn't really work like that, because even if we all got together, all the promotions in this area came together and said, okay, we're going to work together. And we're going to pick the top 20 guys and run a show. First of all, we would have to agree on who the top 20 guys are. And the likelihood of that happening is slim. But let's say we make it through that first jump and we actually agree on who the top 20 guys in this area are, right? And then we go to the actual event, and then it becomes who's the champion? Who's the main event? Who's the top babyface tag team? Who's the top heel tag team? Why is this guy underneath? Why is this guy going under? You understand? Like, it becomes so convoluted by that time that it's a mess anyway, right? Then there's the thing of, what about the other 80 guys we didn't book? You think they're just going to sit at home and go, woe is me, I never mind about professional wrestling. No, you know what they're going to do? They're going to start their own promotion too, and we're back where we started. So it's a lose-lose situation. You understand? I wouldn't say necessarily that Pro Wrestling Mid-South has the 20 best wrestlers in the area, but I have enough confidence in myself and my staff that we put our wrestlers in the best positions to succeed, and we run the wrestling promotion that kind of like we grew up loving, the way professional wrestling was meant to be, and that's what I want to produce. I'm perfectly happy being here in Dyersburg, being here in Ripley, and producing the kind of professional wrestling that I fell in love with, so we can create a fan base of kids and young adults that eventually will bring their kids and their young adults to more wrestling. I've been wrestling 20 years, and you remember when I started. And now there's actually people that come to our shows that were kids when I started, and now they have kids of their own, and they're bringing those kids. And I think that is one of the coolest things that I could possibly be a part of, and I'm looking forward to being kids and grandkids and things like that.
Well, as you were describing that situation, one of the things I thought is as kind of a historical criticism, and do you believe that this was one of the problems with the structure of the old NWA? They had a wide number of promoters, all they were working together. They had a committee, and they had to agree on a champion, et cetera, and so forth. And do you think that this may have been one of the weaknesses that was because they were at one time the organization? Do you think this is one of the organizational problems that allowed Vince McMahon to become so prominent?
Yes and no. I think their thought process was good in the sense that, everyone had their own territory. Those were the NWA territories, and they realized that there was too many world champions out there claiming to be world champions. There was a world champion in Chicago. There was a world champion in Los Angeles. There was a world champion in the South. There was a world champion in New York, right? So their thought process was, let's create one so we all benefit from it. And that's a pretty good concept, groundbreaking, really. Where it gets into the issue is when people wanted their guy to be the champ. And like you said, everyone had to agree. There was a vote of who was going to be and who wasn't, right? So, in like Fritz's case, for instance, he left the NWA at one point because none of the kids got to be world champion. And that's a completely valid point. I mean, he had a strong territory, but maybe it wasn't time, and not everyone agreed. So yeah, there was a bunch of politics and stuff like that. I think that the NWA itself was a great concept, and that was just the negative light at the end of the tunnel. You understand? I think for all the good the NWA did within all those separate territories, and all the work they provided and things like that, I actually think helped thrive the business. I'm much more a fan of territories than I am national companies, because territories are tailor-made to those territories. You understand? Memphis was a very blood and guts, the Southern Heavyweight title is just a prop, where guys are 20, 30 time Southern Heavyweight champions that would get flipped back and forth almost weekly. But then you go to the Mid-Atlantic area, and they were a tag team territory. So a lot of times the tag teams were on top. That's unique. Puerto Rico was another blood and guts territory. Florida was very, wrestling based, Briscoe based, the Grahams and things like that. So I love the fact that each territory has this specific identity to itself. And I think that was one of the driving points for everybody. Like, if a legit territory system was in place now, with the advent of Roku and YouTube and things like that, I think it would benefit the business, quite a bit. There's a YouTube channel out there. It's called Pro Wrestling Territories that, Pro Wrestling Mid-South actually happens to be a part of. And we send our content in to be on that thing. And there's ones from Canada. There's some guys from, all over the country, Kansas and, all around. So that's something people could check out to see if you've never seen anything like that before. But if something like that was able to catch on, I really think we could sway the business in a different direction than it is now.
All right. If I could, one thing I'd like to do is, this conversation was really spurred by the AEW Impact Wrestling cooperation that we're seeing on television currently. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to that and one of the issues that I saw there. On Impact Television, I have seen the AEW World Champion speak in a very dismissive way of the reigning Impact Champion, and how if he has time, he might collect another belt, things of that nature. To me, it seems like that's very detrimental to Impact Wrestling, and they're having it happen on their own program. Is that something you see as a real drawback to working together between promotions?
It is an art in professional wrestling to insult somebody, but insult them in a way that when you beat them, you still come out better on the other side. And that is now a lost art in professional wrestling, and it's definitely an art that Kenny Omega doesn't have. It's an art that a lot of guys in professional wrestling doesn't have. There's an old adage that I don't know how many people have actually heard this or not, but I'm gonna say it right here and now. If you're a professional wrestler and you're fixing to wrestle someone else and you call that guy either old or fat, you understand? It's a lose-lose situation, because if you beat him, then all you did was beat an old fat guy. But then if he beats you, then you just got beat by an old fat guy. So it's lose-lose. Your job is to always build someone up in your promos and in your whatever you're doing. Build them up and then tell the people why you're still going to beat them and why you still have the ability to beat them. You understand? So yes, there's a way he could diminish, or he could insult Impact Wrestling or Rich Swann or whatever he wants to do. He could do that in a way that he could still, at the end of the day, when he beats him and does collect the title, you know what I mean, that it would be beneficial to everyone involved. You understand? But like I said, most guys don't even have the mental capability to wrap their mind around that kind of thought process right now. And that's kind of stuff we really want to get into on the 30-minute Midas touches, breaking down that kind of stuff into whys and the hows.
All right. I know our time is running short. There was one other aspect of the Impact program that caught my attention. Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone of AEW are doing what they refer to as paid promotional announcements on the Impact show. And during that, Tony Schiavone, on more than one occasion, really leveled some criticism, and he took a shot, is what he did. He took a shot, and it was more directed at Access TV than it was Impact Wrestling. And I thought that could create issues with your television partner. And doing that to me seemed very questionable on their part. I want to see your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you don't bite the hand that's feeding you at any point. You understand? Like, you have to know once again, there's a line you can walk to where you can still do what you want to do, but still make everyone happy in the thing. You know, we actually did a show for the Gay Pride Parade in Memphis a couple years ago. And we had some guys on the show that wanted to go out there and wear, Jesus hates you shirts and these kind of suckers, that have the penis suckers and stuff like that. And I told them no. I told them no because one, it's completely disrespectful. At the same time, we're still being paid by the Gay Pride organization to be there to have professional wrestling. This isn't a gay show. We're a wrestling show at a gay event. And that's completely different. And and that kind of same thing with this Access thing. Like, you can diminish and say that you're a bigger AEW can say that they're a bigger company than Impact and things like that, but they don't have to keep taking shots at the television product and things like that. Well, once again, we are over time. Not too bad, though. Not too bad. We're coming up on 32 minutes, but that's not too bad. But once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the 30-minute Midas Touch. I want to thank my co-host, the model, Mark Tipton, and we will be back next week with a brand new episode and a brand new topic. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening. You guys are truly making this one of the hottest podcasts out there. Keep listening. Please write us and tell us if you want to hear something specific. We'd be more than happy to oblige. And remember, you are all as good as